Hello and welcome. The world, or rather 195 nations, have been discussing ways to save the planet from global warming. The much anticipated Conference of Parties 21 in Paris worked overtime for a deal that would, in essence, fix common responsibilities on different nations built on their capacities to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The negotiations pitted the developed versus the developing world. That was the main focus this week. In terms of renown, Angela Merkel has received Time magazine's Person of the Year title for being the leader not only of Germany but of the entire European continent. We'll give you a glimpse of what's happening across the world, pausing to take in unique stories like little ballerinas breathing innocent joy into tense Gaza. This is World Connect, your window to the world, a global picture of our times. Let's set the ball rolling with the focus of the show. Working almost non-stop past their Friday deadline, Conference of Parties 21 finds a final draft of a climate deal that is ready for adoption. Angela Merkel is Time magazine's Person of the Year, the first woman in 30 years to hold the title. Donald Trump's comments on Muslims have landed him in trouble. Apart from calls to disqualify him from the presidential race, Muslim countries have shunned his businesses. Nicolas Maduro is losing his hold over Venezuela. The opposition takes the legislature by two-thirds majority. Maduro could face a recall. And while bombs and violence take their toll on young minds, young people learn to dance away their fears and pain. Negotiations at Paris were hard. Each country had its point of view. All accepted common responsibility, but there were different interpretations to how equitably that responsibility should be distributed. The issues at the core of such negotiations are that the polluter pays. The developed world has polluted the atmosphere in the past, and it must now help the others who are on the growth path to a clean future.
2 weeks of marathon negotiations and sleepless nights. France has submitted a final climate accord draft which it described as being fair, durable and legally binding. The key points highlighted in the draft include limiting the rise in global temperatures to less than 2 degrees Celsius and to pursue efforts to limit the temperature increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. A $100 billion a year flow for funding developing nations beyond 2020. And a 5-year cycle for reviewing national pledges to take action on greenhouse gas emissions.
It acknowledges the notion of climate justice, and it takes account on every subject of differentiated responsibilities of countries, of their respective capacities in the light of national circumstances.
Along with French President François Hollande, UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon made an emotional appeal to delegates to approve the document.
The agreement will not be perfect for anyone if everyone reads it with only his or her interests in mind. But it will be a success for everyone because what brings us here together is the planet itself.
It is hoped that the Paris Agreement proves to be truly historic to make up for the lost time.
President Vladimir Putin ordered his armed forces to act in an extremely tough way in Syria to protect Russia's forces striking Islamic State targets there. Putin said strikes by Russia's Air Force and Navy had inflicted heavy damage on the infrastructure of the Islamic State, which controls large areas of eastern Syria and western Iraq. Nobel Prize winners for the year 2015 collected their awards in Oslo this week. Members of the Tunisian National Dialogue Quartet, which helped build democracy in the violence-torn country after the 2011 revolution, collected the Nobel Peace Prize in Norway's capital. Winners of the Nobel Prize for Literature and Economics were also presented with their awards by Sweden's King Carl Gustaf XVI. Author and journalist Svetlana Alexievich was awarded the prize for literature for her books The Voices of Utopia, exploring Soviet identity described. And the prize for economic science was awarded to Professor Angus Deaton, a British-born American academic, for his work exploring global developments in health, well-being and inequality. Angela Merkel has become the first woman in 3 decades and only the 4th since 1927 to be voted Time Person of the Year. The magazine said she is the de facto leader of the continent of Europe.
Und ich sage ganz einfach, Deutschland ist ein starkes Land.
To be quite honest, if we have to start excusing ourselves for showing a friendly face in times of crisis, then this is not my country.
Wenn uns etwas im Wege steht, muss es überwunden werden.
Her spirited appeal to Europe to accommodate Syrian refugees may have helped her earn this. She was even quicker in opening the doors of Germany, where the world community was debating refugee crisis. One of the most powerful women in the world, German Chancellor Angela Merkel, is the only woman in 3 decades to become the Time Person of the Year. Time magazine said Merkel was chosen as the Person of the Year because she is the de facto leader of a continent, steward of the world's 4th biggest economy, a principled manager and a resolute diplomat. And her leadership has helped preserve and promote an open, borderless Europe in the face of economic turmoil and an ongoing refugee crisis. 61-year-old Merkel beat some of the world's best-known politicians and leaders, including Iranian President Hassan Rouhani, Russian President Vladimir Putin, ISIS leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, and Republican presidential hopeful Donald Trump for the annual honor. Merkel, herself a refugee who grew up in an undemocratic German Democratic Republic, emerged as a messiah for millions looking for shelter. Merkel is just the 4th woman since 1927 to be chosen for the title. The last time a woman was bestowed with the honor was in 1986 when Corazon Aquino, the first woman president of the Philippines, was named Time Person of the Year. In 1952, Queen Elizabeth II and Wallis Simpson in 1936 were picked for the title. The magazine insists it does not look at the Person of the Year as an award, pointing to the past recipients like Adolf Hitler, who was awarded in 1938, Joseph Stalin in 1939 and 1942, and Ayatollah Khomeini in 1979 as examples of unpopular or controversial picks.
Well, all are not happy with Merkel being the Time Person of the Year, and one person who really has taken it to heart is the US Republican presidential candidate, Donald Trump, who too was among the finalists. And he went on to say that Merkel has ruined Germany by letting the Syrian refugees in. And this is not all. Trump and controversies go hand in hand. More on this in American Chronicles. Donald Trump might well be gambling with his words, but his recent comments on banning Muslims from entering the United States seem to have backfired completely. There's a petition to remove him from the presidential race, and his business interests in the Middle East have taken quite a beating. Obviously, this was not his trump card.
Calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States until our country's representatives can figure out what the hell is going on.
Donald Trump is no stranger to controversy. Adding to his long list is the latest statement calling for a ban on Muslims entering the United States. The comments from the 69-year-old US Republican presidential frontrunner came following the massacre in San Bernardino, California by a Muslim couple. Trump frequently uses racially charged rhetoric, but this time his comments have backfired spectacularly.
Anything that creates tensions and creates the notion that the United States is at odds with the Muslim faith and Islam would be counterproductive to our efforts right now and totally contrary to our values.
Donald Trump, the Republican frontrunner, has made a name for himself in the last months by trafficking in prejudice and paranoia.
Human rights activists on behalf of Syrian and Iraqi refugees gathered in solidarity to protest against Donald Trump in New York City. Trump's comments not only drew flack from within the United States but from across the world. British Prime Minister David Cameron dismissed Trump's position as divisive, unhelpful and quite simply wrong. Over 500,000 people in Britain have already signed a petition calling for the US presidential candidate to be banned from entering the United Kingdom. The Gulf Arab leaders have condemned extremist remarks against Muslims and Syrian refugees. Trump's comments cost him business in the Middle East, with a major chain of department stores halting sales of his glitzy Trump home lineup of lamps, mirrors and jewelry boxes, and his signages have been removed from planned residential and golf complex in Dubai. Following the comments, a Scottish university revoked Trump's honorary degree awarded in 2010. Earlier at a campaign rally, Trump appeared to mimic New York Times reporter Sergei Kovaleski, who has arthrogryposis, a chronic condition that limits his arm motion. His comments describing Mexicans who came to United States illegally as killers and rapists had too garnered substantial media coverage from the resulting outcry. Despite the wide criticism, Donald Trump has shown no sign of backing away from the fiery rhetoric.
Trump, though, had his time with a bald eagle, that too, who pecked him several times during a photo shoot with Time magazine. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro's powers have considerably reduced after the opposition got two-thirds majority in the country's legislature. What's more, Maduro may face a recall referendum next year, halfway through his 6-year term. Maduro carries the difficult task of matching his mentor Hugo Chavez, his popularity, and this poll debacle clearly shows he's not measuring up.
It's the worst for President Nicolas Maduro in last 16 years. He lost the legislature majority in last week's polls. The big blow came as Opposition Alliance won 2/3 of the 167 seats in the legislature. It was the poorest performance of the socialist movement founded by late leader Hugo Chavez in 1999.
The people spoke clearly. Venezuelan families are tired of living through the consequences of failure. The people will no longer tolerate even the smallest deviation from the principles that are established in the Constitution. No more. Enough. Respect the decision of people.
The Opposition Unity Coalition now has the power to make sweeping changes. It can even call for a possible referendum on Maduro's leadership. Once Maduro completes half-term of his 6-year office in 2016, a recall referendum could be held. The call needs 4 million signatures. Maduro's mentor, Hugo Chavez, won a recall referendum in 2004. But what has been worrying Maduro is that his popularity never matched as that of Chavez. Another key move that opposition looks to go ahead is the release of jailed opposition leaders. It may want Leopoldo Lopez to be freed, who was given a 13-year prison sentence for allegations of inciting violence. Defiant Maduro was quick to reject any possibility of amnesty.
As head of state, I will accept no amnesty laws because they violated human rights. I say this firmly. They can send me 1,000 laws, but assassins of a nation must be brought to justice and must pay.
Analysts see Maduro's poll debacle as a fallout of poor economic situation. Rising scarcity of staple food, increasing cash crunch may have led to the disaster. Shocked with the results, the president has announced a cabinet reshuffle. He even announced to hold an extraordinary Congress to find out what went wrong.
Mauricio Macri has been sworn in as Argentina's first non-Peronist president, ending more than a decade of populist government, with a promise to revive the South American country's ailing economy. Macri began his 4-year term in a ceremony snubbed by his predecessor Cristina Fernandez, following a spat over where the handover of power should take place. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau welcomed Syrian refugees who landed in his country on a military plane. The first military plane carrying refugees to be resettled there arrived Thursday. Welcoming more than 160 refugees, Prime Minister Trudeau said his country was showing the world how to open our hearts. Well, the newly elected Liberal government has pledged to take in 25,000 refugees by the end of February. Canada's stance on the issue differs sharply from that of the United States, which has been reluctant to take in migrants.
Looks pretty good.
The fifth ministerial conference of the Istanbul process concluded in Islamabad earlier this week. It's a regional grouping of countries neighboring Afghanistan seeking more coordination on counter-terrorism, narcotics control and preventing extremism. Called the Heart of Asia Conference, it was attended by leaders and ministers from 14 member countries, 17 supporting nations and officials of 12 organizations. The Islamabad Declaration called on all Afghan Taliban groups to enter peace talks.
Pakistan is an important country. We share a very long border with Pakistan. We very much hope that Pakistan can play a very influential role and very important role in the peace and reconciliation process.
Afghanistan Foreign Minister urging Pakistan to help restart stalled peace process with Taliban. As the Heart of Asia Summit concluded in Islamabad in Pakistan, focus was once again in bringing peace and stability to the war-torn nation. The two-day meeting came months after the first inconclusive talks between the Afghanistan government and the Taliban. Years of war and conflict have left parts of the country totally devastated, with people lacking even basic infrastructure and struggling to survive. Regional as well as international players are concerned over Afghan situation. China feels that Afghanistan instability will spill over to its western border, while the US wants to avoid an Afghan spiral into the political chaos and violence like in Iraq, where Washington has made huge military investments. US Deputy Secretary of State Antony Blinken also called for Pakistan to use its influence with the Afghan Taliban to push for reconciliation. Security cooperation between Afghanistan and Pakistan is seen as crucial in countering a growing threat from the Taliban and other militants in the region. Pakistani Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif used the occasion to reiterate his support.
The democratically elected government in Afghanistan is the only legitimate authority in the country in accordance with its unanimously adopted constitution. I would like to reiterate my remarks in Kabul on 12th of May, in which I declared that the enemies of Afghanistan are the enemies of Pakistan.
Hours before the Afghan summit was to begin, a militant siege at the Kandahar airport compound in southern Afghanistan claimed at least 37 lives, with several others wounded. The assault began on Tuesday night. The Taliban, which claimed responsibility for the attacks, targeted residential compounds and military bases at the airport, which is used by Afghan, US and NATO military forces.
Beijing was put on red alert following thick smog, and in Syria, rebels have reached a peace accord with the government. This and more in Asia Wrap.
Beijing lifted its first ever red alert for pollution on Thursday as blue skies returned after days of thick smog. The red alert is the highest of 4-color warning system for pollution. About 300 members of the Al-Qaeda-linked Nusra Front started evacuating the last rebel stronghold inside the central Syrian city of Homs on Wednesday under a deal concluded with the Syrian government and supervised by the United Nations. Malaysian airport officials are seeking the untraceable owners of 3 Boeing jets abandoned in Kuala Lumpur for more than a year. The large Boeing 747-200s, 2 passenger and 1 cargo jet, have been racking up unpaid storage fees at the airport.
South African President Jacob Zuma's decision to sack the finance minister Nerhal La Nene has sparked widespread criticism. The development was not easy for investors and markets to digest, and South Africa's currency fell close to a record low against the dollar on Thursday morning. Zuma has replaced the minister with the relatively unknown David Van Rooyen. The trial over the role of a Nigerian megachurch in the deadly collapse of one of its buildings last year has been postponed until next month on Friday. The destruction of the church's guest house in September of 2014, run by the popular pastor T.B. Joshua, killed at least 115 people, including 84 South Africans. Well, the petition for postponement came at the request of the Lagos State Government's Council. spicy cabbage. That's a unique rivalry between the North and South Koreas, and it's called kimchi. And UNESCO says that North Korea's kimchi is as good as the South's. This is part of UNESCO's intangible cultural heritage list, which includes coffee from the Middle East and Oshituti Shomangongo, a festival in Namibia, and bagpipes also in Slovakia.
The North Korean regime has reasons to cheer. After all, it now stands even in a war that it lost to its southern neighbor almost 2 years back. The kimchi, spicy and sour as it tastes, is one similarity the two Koreas share. A daily staple, kimchi provokes equally strong emotions with fierce rivalry between regions, communities and even families over who makes it best. UNESCO has elevated North Korea's version of the pickled cabbage dish to the same lofty status as its southern neighbor's spicy capitalist cabbage. The practice of making the pickled dish has been added to UNESCO's intangible cultural heritage along with 20 other practices from across the world. The communities collectively make and share large quantities of kimchi to ensure that every household has enough to sustain it through the winter. The custom emphasizes on the importance of sharing and is a reminder of the need to live in harmony with nature. A tradition of making and serving coffee in the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Oman and Qatar also made to the list as it is considered a ceremonial act of generosity. Intangible cultural heritage status is awarded to practices and arts that UNESCO feels are both specially important to world heritage and cultural diversity and deserving of lasting protection. UNESCO also recognized Oshituti Shomangongo, a festival in Namibia where communities gather to drink a beverage made from the marula fruit. Bagpipe culture in Slovakia, a tradition dating back to 18th century. And lads dances, a male-only dance form from Romania among other folk dance, song and artisanal traditions.
Excitement is building up to Star Wars The Force Awakens. Eagles of Death Metal performed with U2. The North Korean pop band Muron Bong landed in China. And Frank Sinatra is remembered on what would have been his 100th birthday. Here's Showbuzz.
With just 1 week to go for the long-awaited release of Star Wars The Force Awakens, hundreds of Japanese fans welcomed the film's director and cast at the red carpet event in Tokyo. The movie, 7th in the franchise, is set for international release on 18th December. Eagles of the Death Metal, the band which was performing when the deadliest of the Islamic State attacks took place in Paris on 13th November, made an emotional, powerful appearance at a U2 concert in the city on Monday. At least 130 lives were lost in the attacks. Led by frontman Jesse Hughes at a packed Accor Hotels arena, the California rock band gave a rendition of Patti Smith's People Have the Power before performing their own I Love You All the Time. North Korean pop group the Muron Bong Band is in China to electrify audiences with their performance. The band, formed in 2012, is hugely popular in North Korea. The 3-day friendship performance from Saturday to Monday in Beijing is aimed at harmonizing ties between the two countries. The performances will not be open to the public. It is the band's first performance in a foreign country. Frank Sinatra, whose extraordinary voice made him the most recognized and imitated ballad singer of the century, would have been 100 years old on Saturday. Sinatra died at the age of 82 on 14th May 1998 after a 60-year career in which he rose from high school dropout to American legend. Sinatra's signature tune was a song he at first did not like, My Way. His way was unique, stylish, mercurial and temperamental. Sinatra's solo recording career began in 1939 and continued almost until his death.
Much more, I did it my way.
The ravages of war and violent conflict on the minds of children in one of the world's longest-running conflict zones, Gaza. Now, UNICEF estimates that around 400,000 children need psychological care. And here's a unique way of dealing with the problem: little ballerinas.
Dressed in pink, hair tied high, these little ones practice hard. With their arms stretched out and pivoted toes, copying each step precisely, they are Gaza's latest crop of would-be ballerinas. In a region that has been torn apart by war between Israel and Hamas, where chaos and destruction is a part of everyday life, for the girls aged somewhere around 5 to 8, this ballet school is a haven of calm and order. The dance school was started as a pilot project last year. In a conservative region where ballet is an unlikely option, there are already 50 girls enrolled in the school, and the waiting list runs into hundreds.
We started the ballet course and we wanted first to test the reaction of Palestinian people and families to the ballet teaching. Since we are here in the Arab conservative culture, we thought there might be some opposition by families, but on the contrary, many liked the idea.
For parents, the chance for a child to participate in something so removed from regular Gaza life is both educational and psychologically uplifting.
My daughter is like any other child in Gaza who has experienced the war and was psychologically affected by it. She began having terrifying nightmares and used to wake up crying. Following the first class, she came back home so happy. She was going around in the house like a butterfly.
For the young little girls, this is like a dream coming true.
I used to imitate belly dancing as I saw them on television. Now I'm learning it for real and I just love it.
With Gaza on edge since Hamas seized full control in 2007, some of the children have lived through 4 wars in such a short time. According to UNICEF, almost half of Gaza's 1.8 million people are aged under 18, and of these, nearly 4 lakh need some form of psychological care. Amid the devastation caused by war, schools like these are the best places to find solace from the harsher realities of life.
Well, this brings us to the end of this edition of World Connect, and do send us your feedback. You can write to us. Our email ID is worldconnect@ddnews@gmail.com. You can also follow us on Facebook. But before we leave, here are some of the best pictures captured in 2015 from a Syrian refugee kissing his daughter to a French fire brigade and their members aiding an injured person during the Paris blasts. Thanks very much for watching.